Hi there, thank you for joining me today. If this is your first visit, welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth. If you're a returning visitor, thank you for your ongoing support. Welcome back. I'm going to try and really flash through this today because it's not going to be possible. We know by now that I actually can't do a short video when it comes to this stuff, which is a huge pain for other reasons, but I'll put those comments up in the yarning video. What I'm going to say today is, though, this particular number combination is actually quite prevalent, and there is some really interesting and amazing famous people that I want to talk to how this number applies to their life, and that will help demonstrate the energy, if you like, of the ruling 7. So I'll kick on. I'll try and be fast. I'm not going to linger around. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you're not familiar with the channel, if this is your first time, my name's Anna Pirelli and I'm the business owner here. Looking forward to catching up with you in the future. Now I'm going to kick on, okay? So just a reminder for people, or if you're not familiar, when we talk about ruling numbers, we're talking about calculating the numbers of the birthday. So say 23rd, what's today? 18th of December 2023, we would go 1 plus 8 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 3, and then we would reduce it down to a singular number, because that is what the ruling number is. The only variations are if it becomes an 11, a 22, or a 33, because these are said to be master numbers. They have specific powers. We'll be talking about those in a future video. Now, of course, I'm talking about Pythagorean numerology concepts when I deliver my video tutorials or whatever. The number 7 is an odd number, so therefore it's considered to be masculine, and it's associated with the colour gold. You can check out the other videos to find out what that means. Silver is associated with the moon. Actually, I might as well just tell you now. Silver is associated with the moon and what is considered to be feminine energy, such as intuition, emotion. The 7 is associated with the sun, and the 7, the gold, is associated with the sun and what is considered to be masculine energies of power and action. Okay, so as a 7, this is a really interesting number because it is associated with gold, it is associated with the masculine, but there is a high amount, I feel, of intuitive sensitivity associated with the number 7 as well, but we'll crack on. So here we can see the types of numerical sequences that come down to a ruling number 7. Now, each one of these is going to have a specific vibration attached to it. There are generals. We'll obviously be talking to the general vibration of a 7, but there are specific influences as well. So we'll have a look at that now. So from a general perspective, the 7 is a number of the intellect, which is also combined with the emotions and feelings. They are generally philosophical. They're a bit of a perfectionist. They seek understanding, especially when they're living uprightly. And a challenge for them, of course, is to develop this power of the mind. Meditation will assist with this process, especially if they manage to get alone time. There's a lot of solo time, I feel, that is needed for people with a ruling 7, and that doesn't mean to say that they have to be single and independent and, not building partnerships with people. It can actually be the opposite, but it means that they need to have solo time within a relationship. They generally do engage in travel because they like to feed their mind. And they like to have that cultural awareness. They're big believers in karma, not generally receptive to being on the receiving end of a karmic consequence, I might add. They have a driving need to learn from their own personal experience. And quite often, unfortunately for them, personal experience, this education, knowledge and building of their mind power, and that comes through overcoming personal challenges. And the 7 is associated with sacrifice. There seems to be a lot of loss there, but these people do tend to handle it very well. Where many of us would fall apart, these 7s seem to rise up to any challenges. And the tarot card here that represents the 7, this speaks of them being drivers of their own destiny, because that's the Chariot. You've got two choices. You can go one way, you can go the other way, but ultimately you're the driver. So the life purpose of somebody with a ruling 7, from a general perspective, is this business of learning from personal experience and teaching. And it's not necessarily teaching in a classroom environment like this image here. I mean, it can be. You do get very good teachers, and some of the people that I've met, they tend to lead, say, meditation groups and things like that. They like to learn their own way and then share that information with other people. So when we talk about individualization here as being part of their life purpose, this is because once they have learned something, they kind of embody it, and it's their way is not necessarily the same as everybody else's. I guess there is a saying out there, the path less traveled, or something like that. Yes, I just thought probably the best description of it is this embodiment of the knowledge that they develop, especially through having bouts of aloneness, if you like, is that it gives them a strength of mind, and it empowers them and gives them confidence where they're very comfortable to march to the beat of their own drum. So moving on from there. So the sacrifices that they experience, incidentally, tend to help shape their thinking to support them to become these very practical, earthy teachers and helpers of humanity that they can become and that they can achieve. And when the person's living upright, as we will see by the end of this video, it's just incredible what they can achieve. Okay, so the first thing is ruling sevens have to learn their way. This is a distinctive trait, so you will not be able to tell or teach them terribly much specifically, especially if it comes from a book, okay? Part of their life path is to learn to accept a level of guidance and direction from those people around them, but generally most of their learning is through the actions of doing, okay? They are very active across all walks of life, and because of this sacrifice that many of them experience, I shouldn't say many, I should just be straight up and just go all of them seem to experience, is that they can appear to lead rather sad lives, especially if they've failed to learn from these personal experiences. But going back to it, these losses do give them a very deep philosophical understanding that helps them to move above these experiences and to avoid the really harsh lessons as they mature. They definitely grow an inner strength, and this inner strength gives an appearance of self-confidence, and it's this self-confidence then that helps them to handle these experiences of sacrifice a lot better as well than what other people would. I'm talking about perhaps you or me, with the level of loss that some of these people have, and you will be seeing it soon. It's just, I'm in awe by a 7, I've got to say. I've known a few of them, but the ones that I've found today, it's just really puts the icing on it. They seem to be very positive in the face of whatever adversity occurs to them, because they hold that internal philosophy that everything happens for a reason, which of course they're right. Anyway, they do have a very analytical side, and they have this capacity to really dissect events and situations to find the meaning behind them, because this is part of their journey of self-awareness and self-discovery, if you like. And they do that also through understanding other people and what lies behind their experiences. So until they get a bit of maturity as they're growing and evolving, as all of us do, and learn to develop some of this wisdom and tap into their innate gifts that they've got, they can experience problems in the domestic and business life, and it will often be far from happy and less than joyous. Okay, they've got this tendency to reject the guidance, as previously stated, because obviously that I've got to learn my own way. They can become extremely rebellious, and they can also adopt an attitude of one where they like to be the teacher. So I guess we're saying they're a bit bossy, but they don't appreciate having people try to teach them. So what else? They can become quite annoyed with people if they're trying to teach and share their information and another person's dismissive of them. They can get a bit frustrated with that, although they will do the same. So I guess there's a little bit of a level of hypocrisy there until they've developed a bit more maturity. So, and this includes because they're perfectionists. So with this desire that everything be done correctly, they can end up inadvertently pushing people away, which that can compound feelings of being isolated or alone in the world. And if that happens, the worst case scenarios that can happen for a 7 is that they can fall into this escapism of creating their own fantasy world. So while meditation would be recommended for these people, not if they're going to use it as a form of escapism. They've got a purpose, they're here for a purpose, and you don't achieve your purpose when you're spending all day literally off with the fairies. And actually, so I'm going to come back to it because I've worked in the psychiatric facilities. I've known some truly beautiful people in these facilities, and they are, some of them, not all of them, escaping. Like I remember one lass coming out and I said, "Oh, how are you?" And she said to me, "Oh, I've just been meditating. I've been with my angels." I'm like, "Oh, that's okay. That's lovely." And then she says, "Yeah, so I was there for 4 hours." And you're like, 4 hours out of a day doing a meditation? Like, you can't do your shopping. You can't go down. Basically, you need help to take your own tablets. But you can spend 4 hours in a meditative state. That's not healthy. But anyway, moving along, I've just gone down the rabbit warren again. So there's a few things here. One is that the 7 has to learn, when we talk about advice for them, that completion is about an internal process, and it's not one that comes from the outside or from other people, actually. And if they neglect to maintain their peace, because life throws so many challenges, especially at them, then they will become distracted from their purpose. And once they become distracted, that compounds feelings of, shall we say, malcontent for the better description, because, obviously it becomes a bit vexatious to them because of this perfectionist aspect. So the idea is to keep their equilibrium, spend some time in nature to nourish their soul and also to get in touch with their inner self. Make a commitment to be open to the giving and receiving, right? That key word of new information and advice and development. There's a key part to this as well. Key piece of advice for the people with the ruling 7 is that it is only when we conquest the mental plane that we can create harmony, peace, and evolutionary growth for ourselves. So this is about them taking control, using willpower, okay? Because they have this individual path to walk. They're going to be the movers and the shakers and show us how we could be doing it. So where am I going with this? When you're marching to the beat of your own drum, it's not always easy, okay? Because you do tend to stand out in a crowd. It can be uncomfortable. It can lead people to point the finger at you. You've got to have that confidence and comfort, I guess, in your own convictions to be able to continue to rise against any obstacles. So basically the advice is take care of yourself, nourish your spirit, retain your self-awareness, and continue to develop your soul and your spirit. So any roles that work within the justice or legal system are good for them because they allow the ruling 7 to demonstrate that they're trustworthy. The ruling 7s also have a flair for working with their hands, so they are good as surgeons, carpenters, butchers, that kind of thing. However, the spin side of this is they're often found in the humanitarian positions as well, such as teachers, scientists, philosophers, writers, this kind of thing. In my experience, I've actually tend to find them in the alternative healing fields of practice, doing things like hands-on healing, and I think one of them's called kinesiology, and then working with things like flower essences and that kind of thing. But what we're going to see today when we look for the famous ruling 7s is we're going to have a heap of, yes, famous ones, and most of them are a little on the arty-farty side. So I will continue on. So firstly, this is not a good image for the falling tower. This is one of my AI ones, artificial intelligence artwork. In the actual falling tower, you have the figures of the people, the tower is crumbling down, and you have the people falling over the side. And what this represents is that change occurs whether we want it to or not, and the choice that we have within that is to make the decisions. A prime example of this is the person that goes, I hate my job, I don't like it. And you say to them, well, why don't you find another job? And they go, because I don't have time, it's not on my priorities. Well, what happens is at the end of the day, the universe will do that. If you're not going to make the decision, we'll make it for you, and you will lose your job and you won't be prepared for it. So where I'm going with this, that's what the image relates to. But the ruling 16.7, these people are quite magnetic. They're forceful and they're independent. They are intellectuals and they have great mental versatility. They're very original and they're very clever at expressing their thoughts and ideas. And they can do this in the written or the spoken word. They also have a highly developed intuition, whether they realise it or not. And this is how they're able to assess situations as accurately as they do. The vibration of the number is to bring enlightenment, and this enlightenment happens through the tests, the trials, a bit of heartache, and the clearing of outworn beliefs. So the key for these people is to be flexible and to adapt to change as part of coping with change, and to be able to stand tall against the trials that life has to offer them. Instead of resisting change, go with it, and that will help moderate some of the hardships associated with change. That what you resist persists, but when we stop resisting and go with the flow, life becomes easier. If they become too fixated, for want of a better word, on the material and physical concerns of life, then they will ultimately the energy or the vibration of the number is one that they will experience more disappointments. The key also for peace for these people is to create that space for silence and meditation. And in this way, they're going to be able to overcome any fears and confusion and any pessimism. And this alone space that they get through the silence and the meditation will help strengthen their resolve and their resilience to step into the next role, which is actually one of a spiritual mystic. Past life karma for a 16.7 is promiscuity. I wrote this down before. Anyway, so the current life path is to learn to be faithful and to fulfill their karmic obligations. So I'm not quite sure how that word promiscuity applies here. I'll let you tell me. So the 25.7 is actually the number that I have the most experience with personally. And I would say that in my experience, and which is true to the vibration, they're very thoughtful people, they're very loyal, they're idealistic. They generally do possess clairvoyant ability, and they have a spiritual insight that has been developed through overcoming the hardships and obstacles as part of them developing the balance and self-control. So this once again goes back to meditation. Whatever the sequence is, these people access their strength and gifts through doing meditation, either in a group or on their own in nature. Anyway, they develop the skills because when they're younger, they have these tendencies to be impulsive, and that can lead to some instability or even some volatility as far as their nervous energy goes. And as they mature, they learn to balance that energy out and to direct it into positive accomplishments. So they also tend to be a bit of a crusader, but their crusade or their quest is one for the truth. They want truth and knowledge. So they're always on the lookout for new experiences and ideas, and this is where travel comes in for them. They're always looking for new places and new horizons, and being a traveller, I mean, the ones that I've met, they haven't necessarily all travelled all around the world, but travel has played an important part of their life, and it helps to fulfil their need for freedom and the expansion of their mind. That nature environment is very important for them. So if they can live close to nature, that's going to be really good and help them to stay connected to their inner self. So the 34.7 tends to be a real worker. They're very energetic, they're practical, once again, philosophical, very optimistic, bright people. They also have an energy of patience and kindness about them. But interestingly, they also have a conventional attitude to life. They tend to be very honest and intelligent. They're fair in their dealings. What else? Travel once again features. Spirituality, because they are deep thinkers. They're always looking for that meaning as well. So to achieve the potential of this vibration, they've got to have a certain amount of courage and dedication to their own personal growth and development. They're the thinkers of the world, and they will formulate ethics and moral values and standards based on conventional and traditional moral codes. I'm not quite sure how to explain that, but yeah, I guess in a way, if I was to try and use an example, I would say that with my social work, we have a code of ethics, and that's very conventional. Sort of human rights for everybody, I guess. Key factors in the personal approaches for these people is that they're very straightforward. They like to speak their mind, and they state the truth from their position. This is that honesty part. They hold a genuine insight and concern for humanity, and this enables them to help others, and they get sought out for their helpfulness because they're good advisors and wisdoms. They hold good wisdom, so this is where they're positioned to be good teachers. But I would also say they're probably good counsellors as well, because they've got these well-developed communication skills. So much to get through. Go fast, go fast. Okay, these people are refined and sensitive. They're very intelligent as well. They're very giving, and this is why they're represented here with the Three of Cups. They give of their time. They try to benefit other people. They love to accumulate facts, so they're very knowledgeable. They communicate easily and accurately when it comes to speech or writing. They make good debaters. If they're in a partnership, they work best alone, but they are still good partners. They manage to, because they're good at communicating, they are good at working together with another person to achieve a common goal. They can be silent and introspective, and they need this time in solitude to refocus and reconnect with their inner self on a regular basis, because that helps them to regain balance, because they tend to run on a very fast mental track, and often they expect too much from themselves and from their loved ones. Okay, they do have healing abilities, and they would be encouraged to use these healing abilities to heal themselves as well as humanity. A lot of the time, the people that are givers of the world are focused on giving to others and not to themselves. So the reminder here is, don't forget yourself. Send healing to yourself. Right, here we go. 52/7s are very intuitive, highly intuitive. In fact, they're very dignified. They find their peace and fulfillment because of the high standards that they maintain. If they don't have these high standards and structures, then obviously they're not going to feel settled at all. It will create huge conflict for them. They are able to handle the future with courage, patience and faith, and a good dose of determination. And this is because they intuitively know the causes that create, or the foundations that underpin the problems of many of the life experiences. So because they've got this innate spirituality within them, and they understand that this transcends the material world, they are helpers, and they tend to be popular because of these ideals and standards, if you like, and because they are dependable. There's that reliability that's associated with this. And from a career perspective, these people actually would do really well as counsellors and advisors. And once again, they're often found in humanitarian roles. They are very bright people, same as some of the other ones, and that optimism really appeals to other people. Once again, outdoors is recommended, getting their sustenance from nature, being outside in the environment, watching the animals, the birds, and feeling the sunshine where possible. For the 61/7, if you know anything about tarot, the Seven of Swords refers to attitudes and beliefs. So it's also it also represents this ongoing growth and change, if you like, and shedding of beliefs. So, often we become focused, fixated, even a bit self righteous. So, for me, the way I interpret the 61.7, it's about they formulate these opinions, and life becomes a process of shedding and evolving and accumulation of knowledge. So you don't change the way you think until you've actually had an experience. There we go again, relating that to the 7. And the benefit for the 61.7 is that they're inherently sympathetic. They do mean well, and they are quite responsible. So even though they might come across challenges, they tend to attract support and respect from other people around them, and even acquaintances, not necessarily loved ones. I couldn't find any 61.7s as famous people, so it's difficult for me to show you an example of this. But suffice to say, they do have an emotional stability about them that is attractive, meaning that they're not necessarily reactive. They're not one of these volatile people that if something happens, you've got to worry about how they're going to react. They might be a bit judgmental of others as they grow and evolve, but that will be released as they mature, and whatever judgments they may hold, I don't think are going to be repelling to other people. It's just these high ideals and potentially expectations of people. This might be where they struggle. But overall, they're patient and kind, and as long as they balance their idealism with realism, they should be able to achieve the goals that they have set for themselves and to fulfill their role with humanity. Once again, meditation for them. I think that needs to go without saying. Although for these particular people, I have made a note here that I actually have a feeling that mindfulness strategies are probably more beneficial for this demographic, for those with the 61.7, as opposed to sitting around, meditating and doing OMs or whatever. So the people with the ruling 70/7, they have a very light-hearted disposition. They're very optimistic as a rule, and they can generally cope with most challenges and problems that life will throw at them with a certain level of ease and be able to bounce back. Now, this is due to their introspective and careful nature. They tend to be quite ambitious, and they're very skilled diplomats. They feel protected, so they're able to communicate well in all situations, whether it's business or social, and they tend to be well liked. They're very adept solution finders because they're good at exploring options and seeing opportunities, and they are able to make a decision fairly quickly. When it comes to achieving their goals, they're very practical, they're methodical, self-disciplined, and these gifts are not just restricted to doing well in money-making ventures, although of course they're very good at that as well. They do enjoy travel, and they do well in business partnerships, and you can often find these people in managerial and executive positions. Now, this is the demographic that's most at risk of alienating people if they're not careful to manage their high levels of perfectionism. Now, moving on. So before we take a look at the 88/7s, let's have a look at some of the famous 7s. I recognise that Mel Gibson as a 25/7, his failure of his marriage because of a lack of fidelity might indicate that he hasn't stayed true to the vibration of the 25/7. However, I feel that we can actually credit him with staying on his path and being true to the influences for the best part of his life, bearing in mind that he has struggled with alcoholism, probably across the life path as well. So a bit of background about how the 25/7 relates to his life path is, from what I know, he grew up as a Catholic Orthodox, and that he stuck to these ideas fairly tightly. They've had about 6 children, he and his wife, and his marriage, I think, lasted for over 30 years. His staunch Christian values led him to sacrifice his career at one point, and I don't know that he's ever actually really made a comeback from that after he made the film Passion of the Christ, and he was perceived to have made some anti-Semitic comments around about the same time. He's always been a bit on the controversial side, and he has made some very interesting movies as a producer that I think we could call a slow burn, and this would be part of his idealism as well. Then we take a look at HughGrant. He's an interesting one. From an external perspective, I find it a little difficult to know if he has maintained the energy of the 34-7, as he's always, from what I can gather, been a very private individual, except for those times where he's been caught out doing the wrong thing or something inappropriate, like the scandal with the prostitute that happened quite a few decades ago. I suspect a numerology report on him would probably explain the variations. If we looked at his birth chart and things like that, we can see obviously that he's a very adept communicator. He's certainly very skilled in that. He does have a number of 9s in his birth chart, and he also has 1 0, and I think these will have an influence on his personality traits. But one of the other things, and we haven't looked at this yet, but we will be, is when there's an absence of numbers on the birth chart and what those influences are. And we can see, looking at Hugh's birthday, that he's actually missing the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 and an 8. So there's a lot of gaps on his chart. So that would be quite interesting to reveal. As far as these images go, of course, this is my AI again. Not the best, but it'll do. I decided to include these two because it's just such a fascinating numerological, if I can speak I can't even speak it, okay. Numerology combination for both parties. I mean, it's very interesting that they both have a day number of 7 and a ruling number of a 7, and that would be a really interesting report to do just on either of them. But when you've got two people with the same birthday and the same ruling number, and they've been married now for a few decades, I find that completely fascinating. Michael, of course, is a 34-7 and Catherine is a 43-7. So there you go, stew on that, think on that, because we've got more exciting fish to fry. We're going to take a look at the 88-7. Now, the 88-7 is a very interesting number for me, and I hope I don't go too far over the time limits. This is where it's going to get a bit long. I've actually never met anybody that's got these, but when I was doing the research and the Googling, of course, I know the theory behind the 88-7, and I understand that it's it's a master number and it carries great energy, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But what I managed to find was two people with a ruling 7 who are not 88-7s but carry all the attributes of this, and I believe it's because they've got the 88-7 on their actual birth chart. So we're going to have a look at that in a moment. But for now, what does an 88-7 mean? Well, it's a number of material and physical projects for the benefit of humanity. So obviously it's saying that people that are born with this number, they have capacity to lay the foundations and build structures and infrastructures so that others can gain support from these structures and build upon it. It requires a great deal of strength, self-discipline, responsibility, common sense, and practicality of the highest order. These are really, I can't even think of the words to express this. These are the visionaries to some extent, but they go beyond being a visionary. They are the doers of the world, and what they can accomplish is tangible and achievable, and it inspires like after they've gone and moved on, they've put in place the foundations for other people to work on it and build on that vision. So it's a very powerful vibration, and it's got to be used with integrity. What else have I got with this? There is a responsibility to worldly involvement and to establish institutions and organisations that support humanity. There is a powerful and forceful personality associated with this that attracts others, and that is combined with the capacity to understand the spiritual consciousness. So they're moving beyond the physical and the material. It's kind of, if you were talking about your own aura, it's kind of a real bringing together, and it's underpinned by peace, wisdom, and self-discipline. And anyway, I'm going to move on and go directly to a person who's an example and a demonstration of what this actually looks like when it's in, to see it, if we were to observe it. I don't think anybody would ever observe and realise what was going on when it's in the process. It's through the eyes of hindsight. So this is a beautiful exercise. Now, Caroline Chisholm many people outside of Australia won't have heard of her. However, she's quite famous here. I'm linking something here with the 88 on her birth chart, if you look at this, right? So I've just read to you what the description is of the 88.7. Now, as it happens, when I was looking for famous 25.7s, I found her. Obviously, we can see by her birth date, that's what her ruling number is. She's a 25.7. Anyway, her primary achievements, you may as well say, or what I interpret them as being, because I've studied social work, of course, is we could credit her in Australia for establishing the first women's refuges, but all of her achievements happened, I think it was between 1848 and 1868. And the way she did it, she was very, very clever. What many people won't be aware of is that she was actually born to privilege in England. She was always involved with charitable endeavours. She knew a lot of I think it was Lord Byron or whatever. She knew a lot of high society folk, and she was quite well loved. You can Google her. She was very popular. She was considered to be beautiful back in the day and that. But anyway, what she did, she broke tradition. She, being an English woman, and I think she was Church of England or Protestant or something like that. But anyway, she married a Catholic man, a military man, which of course back in those days would have been a bit confronting and challenging socially, because Irish-English marriages weren't always well accepted, and certainly not Protestant Catholic marriages back in those days. Anyway, she married a Catholic soldier, and they came to Australia because he had to serve out or something like that. Anyway, the story goes that she got over here and she saw what was happening with women and children, which was very problematic at the time. A lot of the women, the Irish women and the Catholic women, were being brought in and abandoned by the men, and they were left in a situation where they were unable to feed and care for themselves. And either way, she decided that something needed to be done about it. But she was smart enough to realise that if she went to the governor and said, I want to do something for these Irish Catholic women, that they would have just given her the heave-ho and just ignored her, basically. Now, this stuff is all documented. It's all summarised. I'm just summarising it, right? So where she was very clever was, instead of going to the governor and putting it like that, she went to him and she told him that she was a bored housewife, and that there were quite a few women in the colonies who'd been very busy doing charitable works back in England, and they needed to have something to do with their time. And she recognised that they had just built new barracks for the armies, and so she asked them if she and the rest of the bored housewives could have the barracks, please, because they'd like to do something for homeless people or children or something like that. She trivialised it. And of course, the governor at the time was just like, yeah, whatever, okay. So he gave them the barracks, and what she did, she and these women, was they actually started caring for the women and children. Now, it started with the barracks, but it extended out. And she was in the colonies for about 30 years before she returned back to England. But her legacy remains. We've got buildings named after her. And as I said, having studied social work, she would be, I would say, the founding social worker in Australia. So I think we can personally in Australia credit her, as I said, for creating women's and family refuges today. And she and her associates, if you like, they taught the women skills and supported them to be able to get employment and that kind of thing. So amazing contributions from her. But as I say, take a look at that birth chart. There's nothing amazing about that birth chart, but she clearly was an amazing woman, and she's got an 88 on the chart, on the spirit plane, emotions and feelings. So she's a very caring person. And this is why I'm rushing today, because I had completed this video and then I found this little bit of information. I thought, my God, this is worth mentioning on here as far as numerology and personal achievements and the 88 goes. Lady Hazel Lavery, I'd never even heard of her before today, but she is another ruling number of a 25-7, but her life path has been far better documented than Carolyn Chisholm's. And we can see what sacrifice means in regard to her life path. And this is because she actually died in the 1930s, and because of her social status and her achievements. This is why it's so well documented. Anyway, just so you know, this image also is one of my AI. So Hazel Lavery, if you're not aware of who she is, apparently it's her face that was featured on the Irish pound note. So you can actually get a detailed account of her history by looking at, I think the video is called The Face on the £1 Note of Ireland or whatever. And as her name's up there, so just have a look. But anyway, the story is that her husband, who was an artist, was requested to paint a painting, and he used her features to represent one of the Irish female, I suppose, inspirations, if you like, or role models for the Irish people. But that leads into, well, how did it all come about? Okay, so let's talk about the influences of the seven on Hazel, right? So in the first instance, she was born in the US. She was born to a wealthy family. Her father died, I think, when she was about 17, so there's the first sacrifice. Within about 12 months of his death, her mother was forced to sell the family home because she could no longer afford it or whatever. So you've got a loss of father, loss of fortune, sacrifice. However, it wasn't just loss of fortune. The mother decided not to buy a new home. Instead, they went and lived in hotels, and they commenced a life of travel, which obviously would have fulfilled some of Lady Hazel's inner desires. But at the same time, there becomes this lack of a house. There's no real stability there. Now, in between all of this as well, Hazel was actually a very gifted artist herself, and she went to Europe to study art, where she met John Lavery, who would later on become her husband, who was an Irish widower and much older than her. But the issue there, when we come to sacrifice again, is that her mother didn't approve of John because she didn't feel that he was an attentive husband, for want of a better description. So her mother encouraged and actually facilitated Hazel to marry an American man and to return to the US, which she did. Hazel did the dutiful daughter thing. But her husband died shortly after the marriage. They had one daughter together. So instead of returning back to the UK and reconnecting with John, she did reconnect with him, but they never pursued anything. Her mother got sick, her grandparents got sick or whatever, so she ended up looking after family members and sacrificing, obviously, her own goals and plans for life for the sake of all of her family and loved ones. So she stepped up to the plate there. Now, eventually, at some point, I think it was, she married John in 1909, so I think she first met him in about 1900, I think it might have been about 1902. So anyway, 1909, she reconnected with John and they finally married. Now, where sacrifice comes in yet again is, although she was a very gifted artist and could have actually become very well recognised in her own right, she sacrificed those career moves to support John to achieve his goals. But this is where her life path gets very interesting, is to support him, because she was considered to be very beautiful at the time, she became a hostess and was a socialite. So because of her beautiful, bright, positive personality, her beautiful looks, everybody kind of fell in love with her, apparently. But the house that they lived in became a magnet to all of the who's who of London, if you like, including having the King and Queen come over to their house, so that, we're talking King George and Queen Mary here, because John was into doing portraits. So anyway, the King and Queen come over, they get their portraits done. Winston Churchill becomes part of the furniture there. They've got all these very high-placed connections. Just a reminder that she's lost all of her family of origin here by this time. Anyway, so well placed were they socially at that time that they were actually notified by letter when World War II was declared at the same time that the Germans received their telegram. So basically what it says in this doco is that the telegram was sent to Germany declaring war, and at the same time a letter was written and taken over to the Lavery's house and put through the letterbox. Because they had such an extensive network, it was to inform them that war had been declared. So obviously Winston Churchill was very, very friendly with the family. Anyway, so this is just to state their place and social connection, because what happened from there is John was Irish, Irish born, raised in Scotland. Hazel was 6 generations Irish, and they went back to Ireland a couple of times. And Ireland, of course, had been having a civil war and conflict for about 800 years. And so she decided that this is the intuitive guidance. She decided that what was happening was wrong. So she took it upon herself to try and resolve the conflict by bringing parties together. So this is why I think she's recognised but very understated. So she played a pivotal part in the peacekeeping conferences because despite the fact the war had been going on for 800 years, she was like, it's got to stop. We just need people to talk to each other. So she brought her husband into the situation of doing portraits of all the leaders on both sides, whether it was English, whether it was Irish, whether it was Protestant, whether it was Catholic. They did this whole fairness and equity thing. Then from there, they wanted to start the negotiations. Obviously, not just them, there were other people, Michael Collins, and I can't remember all the names of these people that were basically fighting with each other. Of course, you had your English people that were against the Irish. All of this stuff was going on. So what they were trying to do, the Laverys, and what they ended up achieving was to build trust and confidence from all these different parties with all their individual vested interests, and encourage them to step up to the table informally and to have conversations with each other. Now, this has apparently gone down in history that the negotiations that ultimately ended up becoming formal ones were informally discussed over at the Laverys' house, over dinner parties hosted by Lady Hazel, where they actually say that while obviously Lady Lavery and her husband are not responsible for resolving the conflicts. What this brought to the table, literally, because it's around a dinner table, is an opportunity for opponents to meet and see each other as human beings and to have a conversation and respect the differences, if you like. It didn't mean that they changed their viewpoints or anything like that. It just meant that they started to respect each other a bit more. So anyway, this is a fascinating story because if you look at what happened, the outcomes of this was that she did bring them together and they did negotiate a peace agreement. Anyway, I can't add any more to that. Just go and watch the video yourself. I'm just going to close this down really rapidly.